Good afternoon, everybody. I bring warm welcome from Zydus Gynex division, the division which has been dedicated to gynecology. And I thank the Foxy president, Dr. Alpesh Gandhi, to institute this wonderful webinar series of Foxy Connect, a digital initiative by Foxy and Zydus, which we have every week. Today, we have the session on gestational diabetes, and we have an elite panel of speakers and panelists to take us to throw light on this very important topic of gestational diabetes mellitus. When it comes to GDM, despite the outer veranda, we are ruled by fear. Despite a pandemic of over communication, GDM management is a queen of controversy. To quell the same, our small attempt of introduction of the topic by Dr. Mukta Jain to quell the controversy. I'll invite Dr. Mukta Jain. It is my privilege to introduce Dr. Mukta Jain to our viewers. Can I have the CV, please? Dr. Mukta Jain is a renowned gynecologist at Peach Sethi Government Hospital in Madhya Pradesh, working as a civil surgeon in Indore. She has been past president of Indore OBGY Society and editorial board of JGOA, organized by many academic seminars and conferences in the society. She has been speaker for various national conferences. I welcome on behalf of DocMod and Zydus and Foxy Dr. Mukta Jain for today's program. It is my privilege to introduce our esteemed panelists who are well known all across the country. Dr. Lakshmi Srikhande from Nagpur, Medical Director of Srikhande Fertility Clinic, Chairperson Designate ICOG 2020, National Corresponding Editor Journal for OBGY of India, JOGI Clinical Secretary, past Senior Vice President Foxy, and we can see the list of credentials that she has multiple publications under her credential, and she have been faculty in numerous national and international conference. It is my privilege to welcome Dr. Lakshmi Srikhande as panelist for this program. May I have the second CV? We have Dr. Pooja Loda from Pune. Again, a young dynamic gynecologist with specialty in fetal medicine and fetal therapy. She is director of Kangaroo Cradle Deccan, the fertility fetal medicine clinic Pune, and one of the most active person in all the scientific programs in AMOGS, in Foxy, and in POGS. She is associated with Ruby Hall and is attached with as a lead consultant in the Department of Fetal Medicine. She is Managing Council Committee of Pune OBGY Society for 2020-2021. Welcome, Dr. Pooja.
Thank you, Sudhir.
It's my privilege to welcome Dr. Ramani Devi, the person whom we know. I will say rather, I term Dr. Ramani Devi as the person behind the clearance of endometriosis concept, because numerous amount of work has been done during her tenure when she was in charge of the Foxy endometriosis committee in 2014 to 16, and the search continues as she has been conducting numerous programs in the field of endometriosis and other complications. Dr. Ramani Devi is Managing Director, Ramakrishna Medical Center and Janani Fertility Center, have won 10 gold medals, and we can see again the list of credentials that madam has. She have been recipient of numerous awards. She have been present as an editor for multiple Foxy journals. She has been recipient of numerous awards, to name a few. Dr. Durusha Distinguished Community Service Award, which was latest in the year 2020. Welcome, madam, and it is a privilege to welcome you in this program. I'll now welcome our next panelist, Dr. Sachin Goti, who is MS DNB Honorable Consultant Medanta Hospital Indore, Director of Happy Sansar Private Limited, and founder of Happy Pregnancy. Welcome to you, sir. And now I hand over the session to Dr. Jayashree Sridhar have joined. We have Dr. Jayashree Sridhar who will be moderating the panel today. Dr. Jayashree Sridhar is a leading gynecologist and obstetrician with 26 years of experience. She is from Indore. She has also a laundry list of key achievements. She have been a great academician, multiple involvement in lot of academic initiatives. She have been postgraduate and DNB in obstetrics from Chennai, Tamil Nadu, achieved degree and distinction and skill in IVF, hysteroscopy, and laparoscopic surgeon. Welcome you, madam. And now I hand over the session to Mukta Jain to take us forward for today's event. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. At the outset, I thank Dr. Alpesh Gandhi and Dr. Jaideep Ta for giving me this opportunity to talk about gestational diabetes mellitus. And I also thank all my esteemed panelists, Dr. Ramni Devi, Dr. Srikhande, Dr. Pooja, Sachin, and last but not the least, Dr. Jayashree, who all agreed on the first phone call to be here with me to discuss gestational diabetes mellitus. I also thank the Zydus people for arranging all this and Asma Sheikh for being after my back to do this webinar for all of you. So here we start. So this is about gestational diabetes mellitus. So the definition and magnitude, as we all know, gestational diabetes mellitus is defined as carbohydrate intolerance of variable severity with the onset or first recognition during the present pregnancy. The hyperglycemia that develops during pregnancy and resolves after birth is GDM and is currently the most common complication of pregnancy, and the prevalence of undiagnosed hyperglycemia and even overt diabetes in young women is increasing. So the etiology, we all know pregnancy is a pre-diabetic state. Pregnancy leads to marked insulin resistance and an increased insulin requirement, which leads to GDM. It complicates 4% of all pregnancies, and 60% to 80% of women with GDM are obese and experience insulin resistance. Also, maternal overweight, late childbearing, Asian ethnicity, previous history of diabetes mellitus and gestational diabetes in a family member, and pregnancy, having twins and male baby also are risk factors for GDM. Now, the physiological changes why pregnancy is a diabetogenic state, because there are high levels of hormones produced by the placenta, that is HPL and cortisol, which are insulin antagonists, and relative insulin resistance is caused by them. Why we are afraid of this? Glucose crosses the placenta by facilitated diffusion, and fetal blood glucose levels closely follow the maternal level. So an increase in fetal blood glucose level also lead to fetal adiposity, more fat deposition around the abdomen, and macrosomia thereafter, leading to other problems. Now, this is the one-step test which has been agreed upon by all the societies now, and it is also in the Government of India guidelines for testing of all antenatal women coming to antenatal clinics. So there was first a 50-gram test, then a 100-gram test, then a fasting, then a postprandial, but now this is the one-step test, that is 75 grams of oral glucose tolerance test at first visit, and then between 24 to 28 weeks, irrespective of fasting status. Blood glucose, if found more than 140 milligrams per deciliter at 2 hours, is labeled as gestational diabetes mellitus. So, pregnant women in community testing at first antenatal visit with 75 grams oral glucose. If it is positive, then the 2-hour levels are more than 140. If it is negative, 2-hour levels are less than 140. If positive, we have to manage as GDM as per guidelines. If negative, we have to repeat testing at 24 to 28 weeks. Positive again, then we have to manage as GDM negative, then we have to manage as normal antenatal cases. So now the most important thing is how do we change our strategy to minimize the exposure to COVID-19. So these are the proposed guidelines by WHO. We perform HbA1c and random plasma glucose test at first appointment to detect overt diabetes and identify those at highest risk for gestational diabetes. We have to avoid oral glucose tolerance test at 24 to 28 weeks gestation. Offer HbA1c test along with fasting plasma glucose test. Monitor women with past gestational diabetes. Now, how do we manage an antenatal patient with GDM? We have to call an antenatal patient at least monthly and maybe a little more. She has to be reviewed by the obstetrician and the diabetologist in 1 to 3 weeks if needed. And clinical and sonographic growth assessment in 2 to 4 weeks from diagnosis of GDM to term. For fetal surveillance, we use kick count, cardiotocography, and biophysical profile. Since I am working in a government setup, I always tell my patients to use the kick counts. The patient has to lie on her side, and if she sees that within 2 hours there are 10 kicks at least, then I am happy and she should also be very happy. Then the last is a fetal anomaly scan. Now the blood glucose monitoring. There can be a self-monitoring of blood glucose. How often now? This is very controversial. All guidelines mention differently. Some say 6 times, some say 4 times. So the more agreed upon was this one, that at least you have to measure it 4 times a day. First is fasting, then 2 hours after breakfast, lunch and dinner. And in low resource settings, we can do it twice and we have to document the relation to meals. Then a continuous glucose monitoring with an enzymatic sensor. This can also be done. And HbA1c, which reflects average glucose of 3 months or maybe 10 to 12 weeks. What are the glycemic targets in GDM patients? I mean, how much do you want to achieve? So the targets for glucose control during pregnancy, the fasting glucose should be less than 95, 1 hour postprandial should be less than 140, and 2 hour postprandial should be less than 120 milligrams. And we have to monitor HbA1c every 4 to 6 weeks or maybe 8 to 10 weeks. We have to educate the patient to recognize and treat hypoglycemia. She can ingest 15 grams of sugar, that is 3 teaspoons, or she can have glucose biscuits always with her, or she can have some candies and she can swallow them if she feels she's getting hypoglycemia. Then our target blood glucose during labor and delivery remains from 72 to 126. It can vary, it can go up till 140 maybe, but these are our targets. So, how to manage a pregnant woman with GDM. First of all, we always go on to the medical nutritional therapy. We start her on medical nutritional therapy and put her only on that. After 2 weeks, we can again do a postprandial plasma glucose level. If it is less than 120, we continue with the MNT. If it is more than 120, we can start insulin therapy or oral antidiabetics. If it is less than 120 and continue with MNT, then we have to monitor 2 hour PPPG up to 28 weeks once in 2 weeks and after 28 weeks once a week. If it is more than 120 and we have started her on insulin therapy, then we have to monitor fasting blood glucose and 2 hour postprandial plasma glucose every 3rd day or more frequently till insulin dose is adjusted to maintain normal plasma glucose level. and monitor 2-hour PPPG once weekly. So medical nutritional therapy, this is an individual food plan based on BMI of the patient, basal metabolic rate, physical activity level, and always in consultation with the dietitian. The goals are, we want to achieve a normoglycemic state. We want to prevent ketosis because ketosis is a major factor which leads to fetal anomalies. We also want to provide adequate weight gain for the mother and the baby. And we want to maintain adequate fetal well-being and prevent hypoglycemia in the patient. And we give 2 weeks for the diet therapy as we talked about. The nutritional plan includes caloric allotment, a carbohydrate intake. We have to ensure that it is in the proper ratio, and a caloric distribution also for various meals. Dr. Lakshmi might want to talk more about it when we talk in the panel. So what is the caloric distribution like? So in the breakfast, we do not allocate a lot of calories. It is 10 to 20%. In the mid-morning snack, it can be 5 to 10%. The lunch is 20 to 30% of calories. And in the mid-afternoon snack, it is 5 to 10%. The dinner is lot more. It is 30 to 40%. And you might want to add a 5 to 10% of the bedtime snack. Why this so? Because we want to prevent the early morning hypoglycemia, which occurs very frequently in diabetic patients. So what happens if the patient has a normal physical activity, that is, she works for has a workout for 30 minutes a day? So physical activity improves her metabolic control. It reduces the insulin resistance. It increases the insulin sensitivity, and it also increases the insulin production by pancreas. It reduces the cardiovascular risk. Always the risk is more in diabetic patient. It also improves the weight control, and there's an overall well-being always, with the muscles being stretched out and the muscles being formed due to the activity. We also have to monitor the fetal activity and blood glucose before and after the activity. What is our target weight gain in gestational diabetes? Pre-pregnancy BMI, if it is less than 18.5, it is usually present in type 1 diabetes. And these category of patients are known as underweight, and the total weight gain can go up till 18 kg. Up till 24.9 BMI patients are normal weight patients, and their weight gain we can allow up till 16 kg. Up till 29.9 kg, these are overweight patients, we allow 11.5 kg, and more than 30 BMI patients, they are obese. And in these patients, we want the weight gain not to be 9 kg. Normally, it is very difficult for us to tell the patient to restrict her weight gain, but these are our targets. Now, what if the 2-hour postprandial glucose is more than 120? So how do we go about it? First, there's a medical nutritional therapy for 2 weeks. Then we repeat our 2-hour PPPG. If it is less than 120, then we repeat the test every 2 weeks in the second trimester, and in the third trimester, weekly repetition is there. If PPPG is more than 120, then we have to start medical management, insulin and oral anti-diabetic drugs. So now we are allowing oral anti-diabetic drugs being given to our GDM patients. The 2 anti-diabetic drugs are glyburide group and metformin group. The glyburide group increase the insulin secretion. There's no difference in glycemic control between glyburide and insulin treatment but there's a 2-fold higher risk of neonatal hypoglycemia in patients who receive glyburide rather than insulin. In the metformin group, the metformin freely crosses the placental barrier. It is transferred in breast milk. There is no difference in glycemic control and pregnancy outcome. It reduces NICU admission and neonatal hypoglycemia. Oral antidiabetic drugs are more convenient, less expensive, have more treatment adherence as compared to insulin. And so they are chosen in patients who cannot afford insulin, who cannot store insulin, who do not know how to give insulin to themselves, and they may be used from second trimester instead of insulin if MNT fails. Among anti-diabetic drugs, metformin may be better choice than glyburide. We have IVF specialists in our panel, and they would gladly say that patients who are taking metformin are PCOS patients and have conceived with IVF. They would continue up till 12 to 14 weeks to avoid abortions. Now, when to start insulin? So, when blood glucose targets cannot be achieved by MNT, then we start insulin. We've already talked that we would rather prefer insulin to oral anti-diabetic drugs. We have to pair rapid acting with an intermediate or long acting insulin, and we have to store the insulin in the door of refrigerator. Insulin requirements we know increase throughout the pregnancy, and injection human insulin premix 3070 is advised. We can also use the insulin pen, which is freely available and very easy to use nowadays. These are the calculation guidelines for insulin. In the pre-pregnant stage, it is 0.5 to 0.6 units per kg body weight. In first trimester, 0.7 to 0.8. Second trimester, 0.8 to 1 unit per kg body weight. Third trimester up till 36 weeks is 0.1 to 1.2. And postpartum, the insulin requirements decrease dramatically to 0.6. So we have to be very, very careful in the postpartum period. Now, pregnant women with GDM not controlled by MNT and oral anti-diabetic drugs, and if the 2-hour postprandial plasma glucose is more than 120, we start with human insulin 3070 subcutaneous 30 minutes before breakfast once daily. Then we do a fasting blood sugar and 2-hour postprandial glucose every third day. And now if the fasting blood sugar falls to 95 and ppPG to 120, more than 120, we have to increase the insulin 2 units plus MNT. And then repeat fasting blood sugar and 2-hour ppPG every third day till the dose of insulin is adjusted to keep fasting blood glucose less than 125 and 2-hour less than 120. And we continue the same dose of insulin plus MNT and repeat fasting blood sugar and 2-hour ppPG every 2 weeks before 30 weeks and thereafter. If the fasting blood sugar is more than 95 milligrams and ppPG is more than 120, we give insulin in two doses, MNT also, and increase insulin by 4 units plus an evening dose. So we have to give 2 doses of insulin. Then insulin type and regime should be individualized. Blood glucose, if it is 120 to 140, we give 4 units, 140 to 180, 6 units. More than 200, it is 8 units. More than 200, I am very, very scared for embryopathy. Now, caution. If the patient is having nausea, vomiting, and she is not able to take food orally, a bell should ring in our mind. She might get hypoglycemic. If the fasting blood sugar is more than 200, with or without insulin, be careful with her. If fasting blood glucose is more than 150 or post breakfast is more than 250, even after insulin, please do consult a diabetologist along with. If the total insulin dose is exceeding 20 units, do take a call whenever you have to about if you have seen her before 18 weeks, then do take a call with your diabetologist. It's very important. Hypoglycemic episodes occurring more than once a day, again you have to readjust the dose. And pregnant women very often refuse to take insulin even if their blood glucose is more than 200. Please counsel them very carefully about the embryopathies and also about the complications which might happen in the neonate. Pooja is going to talk more about it. Then there can be pregnancy complications, PIH, polyhydramnios, and preterm labor. PIH, in cases of PIH, we must avoid use of metformin. So these are additional treatments. We have to treat homocystinemia, vitamin B supplementation, DHA supplementation, myoinositol, and vitamin D. These are the newer treatments alongside our insulin and oral antidiabetic drugs. So labor. This is the most complex situation during GDM patients, which if they want normal labor, if we want to give them a normal labor, we have to be very careful about their insulin dosage. So if their blood glucose, if we want to prevent RDS in the neonate, and if she goes in labor between 24 to 34 weeks, we have to give antenatal steroids. We have to monitor blood glucose 2 hourly in labor. We have to avoid the morning dose of insulin on day of induction or day of labor. And we have to neutralize the dextrosaline which we give with insulin to keep the blood glucose between 90 to 120 milligrams. So blood glucose, if 90 to 120 milligrams, we do not have to give any insulin. 120 to 140, 4 units in the drip. 140 to 180, 6 units. More than 180, 8 units. And that is 100 ml per hour, 16 drops per minute. So the intrapartum management, we must monitor blood glucose and urine ketones too. We have to maintain the RBS in between 72 to 144. When we do a planned cesarean section, it should be done early morning. Night dose of insulin should be given. Patient should be nil parolar. When she is NPO, we must skip the morning dose of insulin and we must neutralize the DNS with insulin. So this is just the repetition. In the neonate, we have to monitor for hypoglycemia, hypocalcemia, hypomagnesemia, hyperbilirubinemia, and birth injury. Early breastfeeding must be instituted. We have to monitor the fetus very carefully. If it is hypoglycemic, 10% dextrose IV 2 ml per kg over 2 to 3 minutes should be given. Of course, we must manage with a neonatologist. So how do you have fetal surveillance? Week-wise, and 8 to 10 weeks, we have to do a sonography. 10 to 12 weeks, HbA1c. HbA1c, one thing I must talk about here is that when we do HbA1c, also do the hemoglobin levels, because if the patient is anemic, her HbA1c rises. So that also should be always in our minds, that the patient, if anemic, then you have to correct her anemia first. 16 to 20 weeks, maternal serum AFP genetic testing. 18 to 20 weeks, anomaly scan. 24 to 26 weeks, fetal echo is very important. There are many cardiac anomalies in the fetus. So growth monitoring, sonography from 20 weeks, assessment of fetal distress, twice weekly NST or weekly biophysical profile from 28 to 34 weeks, uterine artery Doppler and amniocentesis for LS ratio. Maternal surveillance with pre-existing diabetes. She already had diabetes and now she is pregnant. So HbA1c every 4 to 6 weeks, random blood sugar every visit, urine analysis, renal function test with total proteins, 24 hours urine protein and creatinine clearance. Retinal examination is very important. A very rapid correction of hyperglycemic to a euglycemic state may produce an acceleration in the retinopathy. This is a very important point. You cannot just accelerate the process of euglycemia and thyroid function tests. So, gestational diabetes mellitus positive. A post-delivery follow-up. Prophylaxis against infection is important. Insulin requirements drop rapidly after delivery, so perform fasting blood glucose and postprandial plasma glucose on third post-delivery day. Encourage and support breastfeeding. Contraception, very importantly, we must discuss with the patient. Low dose estrogen progesterone is preferred rather than only progesterone pills because they cause blood glucose levels to rise. Check glycemic status by 75 grams OGTT 6 to 12 weeks after delivery. If normal, repeat at 6 months, then yearly. Normal, 2 hours less than 140. Diabetes, 2 hours more than 200. Impaired fasting, more than 120. Impaired glucose tolerance, 2 hours is 141 to 199. So future risk of diabetes mellitus is always there. Approximately almost 25 to 50% people land up in future diabetes mellitus type 2. So lifestyle modifications and metformin can be recommended for them. So postpartum care and advice, we have already discussed this. So gestational diabetes is a common problem in India. Risk stratification and screening is essential in all Indian pregnant women. Tight glycemic targets are required for optimal maternal and fetal outcome. Patient education is essential to meet these targets. Long-term follow-up of the mother and the baby is essential. Thank you all for listening to me patiently and all our panelists. I welcome you all for the next session. I think Jayashree, we can start with the panel now.
So I'm sharing the screen. So today we are going to talk about, we don't have time to cover all the topics, but we'll just touch a few mundane ideas just for change or controversial in GDM. So it's going to be addressed by our Vice President of South Zone Foxy, Dr. Ramani Devi, Madam Dr. Lakshmi Shrikhande, Dr. Pooja Loda, and Dr. Sachin Goti of Indore. Yeah, Mukta madam, please start with so our just introduction. What are the questions we are going to address today? What are those mundane ideas? Which screen test and why? The peripartum evaluation of GDM must be under closer scrutiny. And then, can most of the GDM be managed on diet by medical nutrition therapy? What are the magic portions in medical nutrition therapy? Can USG help in to reduce IUFD in GDM? How do you monitor macrosomic infants? Pooja Loda will be telling us, and Sachin will be telling us what are the social media uses of how do you use the social media to optimally manage these patients? Mukta madam, please take Ramani madam's patient.
Yeah. So first of all, let me thank Dr. Mukta Jain and Dr. Jayashree and all whoever has organized this for in this particular very important topic of gestational diabetes. Dr. Mukta has given a clear overview of about what are the sequence of gestational diabetes. Here, the incidence of gestational diabetes, I would like to say, it is slightly on the higher side in the southern states. See, we have a study by the Chennai group, Dr. Balaji, Dr. Sheshaya group, where they have found out in the rural area it is around 13%, but in the urban area it is uniformly all over Tamil Nadu, it is around 17%. So it actually 1/3 of the world population of diabetic patients during pregnancy, we have it in our country. So this is a story of a 35-year-old fourth gravida, where she had a first pregnancy. It was an intrauterine fetal death at 33 weeks, and she was not investigated. Okay, then second pregnancy, she was found to have a gestational diabetes at the age of at 22 weeks of gestational age on insulin, and she had an elective section. Again, she lost the baby because of hyaline membrane disease. Then the third pregnancy also, she had an Mr. Sac. Now her BMI is 29, normotensive. So from this history, what I would suggest is probably see, go back to the previous slide. Go back to the previous slide. Back. So the first pregnancy, she had an intrauterine fetal death at 33 weeks.
Yeah.
Probably that time itself, she would have had just glucose intolerance, which was missed. So that was the probable reason. And in the second pregnancy, she had been diagnosed to have insulin, resistance, and she was started on insulin. But again, she was delivered at 36 weeks, and that baby also died because of hyaline membrane disease, which are all the common complications we see in a diabetic baby. Third, again, a missed abortion. So again, miscarriage rates are also very high. And it was a study by Gluck et al., some long-term study where he says simple addition of metformin to these patients can bring down the incidence of missed abortion from around 60 to 70%. It can come down to less than 5 to 10%. The probable reasons for missed sac are hyperglycemia that is present at that time, or it could be a fetal anomaly which is supposed to start at 7 to 8 weeks of gestation. Could be because of the myoinositol deficiency or hyperglycemia, or due to ketoacidosis, or it could be an endocrine disruption. So there are so many reasons, and we know that anomalies depends upon the hyperglycemia to which the fetus is exposed. Because when it is exposed to fetal hyperglycemia at say around 8 or 9 weeks, maybe the child has got a higher chances of getting neural tube defect. So likewise, with each gestational age, at a particular gestational age, the child can the fetus can have neural tube defect, or subsequently it can have a cardiac defect or a ventral defect or spinal cord defect, so on. So it depends upon the gestational age at which the hyperglycemia has occurred. And macrosomia is another thing. If the mother is not controlled with diabetes, then macrosomia occurs at the third trimester. So again, there is problem with the development of surfactant formation at the lungs of the fetus that can lead into hyaline membrane disease. So according to our Government of India proposal, all these antenatal mothers are given with steroids so that will protect the baby from hyaline membrane disease. So rightly pointed out, the first visit of the patient should have a glucose GCT done. See, we no more do a long GTT, that is 0 hour, 1 hour, and 2 hour or 3 hour.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. First visit, we very rightly pointed, is very important. The first visit we should not miss.
Yeah, that is the most important. See, but with the COVID period that we are doing, as whenever she comes, we do a random blood sugar with the hemoglobin A1C. When the hemoglobin A1C is less than 6.1, we are happy that the patient has got a preconceptional hyperglycemia is not there. But whereas in a routine period, we can ask her to have a single GCT. And if we find it, then we must assess the risk factors for that particular patient. But like an Asian ethnic population, all our Indians are at a high risk. Nobody is at a low risk of developing diabetes. So we need to do a GCT for all these.
To attend attendance, no, because the previous IUD they were giving a rest and all. So she was being overfed and she gained a lot of weight. Even by 18 weeks, she had gained 8 kg already. Throughout pregnancy, her weight gain was 25 kg.
So we need to advise her, right? If you find out that the patient has got hyperglycemia, first thing is advise her lifestyle modification by the way of dietary modification plus exercise. Exercise, she can go for a routine walking, or when she is sitting, she can have an upper limb exercise or a lower limb exercise, which can help her to burn the calories. Then you sort out her diet pattern. You can take either the help of the nutritionist or you yourself as an obstetrician. We can, according to the local practice of the dietary pattern, we can advise them. We can ask them to take 3 larger meal with a 3 small snacks in between. So thereby we can spread the total calories. Yeah. So
nutritionist brings, And madam, this patient, no, because of her excessive weight gain at 33 weeks, she complained of breathlessness and epigastric pain, and she was advised routine investigations seemed normal, so she was sent home. Then this jalebi is now in a soup, which is so ugly and untasty. So what did we miss here? The patient had a severe MI. She came to the emergency ward with severe breathlessness and SpO2 less, and she was diagnosed and hypotension, and she had a severe anterior wall MI. So because breathlessness and all that is so common, so we should have taken it seriously. Should we have done a lipid profile? Though the patient was saved and ultimately mother and baby went home, but she was in the ICU and hospital for more than 3 weeks.
Shall I tell you one thing, Dr. Jayashree? All the diabetic, gestational diabetes with a bad obstetric history, the maternal echocardiogram and ECG and renal function test are a must. And
that's
especially for...
Yes, ma'am, we missed that,
Hyperlipidemia is no pre-gestational diabetic patient has got a metabolic syndrome. She is at a high risk of having profile. She should have had a consultation with a general physician or with a cardiologist. So all the pre-gestational diabetic patients, we are in the habit of doing maternal echo, ECG, renal function test, and then retinal examination should also be done. So all this can also help us to detect, identify whether she is at a risk of developing, whether she has already got an ischemic heart disease or whether she is at a risk of developing them.
Yes, ma'am.
One more thing is that breathlessness could be because of superadded preeclampsia, also because the diabetic patients are at a high risk of
pre-gestational.
So you should, and massive weight gain she has had. That is also another pointer towards the occult edema she has. So that has also to be considered. It could be an associated preeclampsia that is causing a breathlessness.
Yeah. So next case, Lakshmi Srikhande, madam, good afternoon. You are taking up Mrs. Cherry. She's not in such a merry situation. So she's a 25-year-old with a good BMI of 22. At first visit at 12 weeks, her DIPSI test shows 180. She's a very anxious kind of a patient. History of PCOS with fasting insulin of 38. Married life of 3 years, and she's a normotensive. So what is the cherry on cake? Her 12-weeker NT scan was normal. At 20 weeks, so she was put on. So what would you do, madam? Would you like to put her on medical nutrition or OHS? Lakshmi Srikhande, madam.
Yes. She should be first given a trial of MNT, that is medical nutrition therapy, for at least 2 weeks. And after 2 weeks, you have to do the DIPSI test again, and based on that values, you have to decide. When we say medical nutrition therapy, ideally, whenever we are managing GDM, it's a teamwork. In bigger setup, we have the luxury of having a physician, a nutritionist, ideally her diet chart, as rightly pointed out by Dr. Mukta, Dr. Ramani, that it should be done by a nutritionist. As a gynecologist, sometimes we might not be able to prepare or do justice to the diet chart. Yes, and it has to be according to the socioculture and her individual preferences as well. Whenever you are thinking of giving medical nutrition therapy, you have to have the therapeutic goals, that you have to prevent the hypoglycemia, you have to achieve the normoglycemia, prevent ketosis, provide adequate maternal weight gain, and you have to see for the adequate fetal well-being as well. As you said, BMI is 22, means she is in the normal BMI category. So you can allow her weight gain up to 12 to 16 kgs. Diet, Dr. Ramani has already said, you have to basically shift her from a high glycemic index diet to a low glycemic index diet. Her whole diet should have less than 50% carbohydrates, around 20 to 30% proteins, and around 20 to 25% of fat. The total calorie intake, as she comes in normal weight gain category, it has to be 30 kilocalorie per kg. So now it is really a Herculean task to plan an adequate diet chart. And in my case, I will certainly take the help of the dietitian. As Dr. Ramani has already said, physical exercises should never be forgotten unless and until it is contraindicated. She should be advised to do physical exercises, at least walking and upper body weight training exercises, because that will also help in controlling her glucose levels. And whenever she is doing exercises, before starting, it has to be under medical supervision. The kick count, she is too early for that, but her glucose level should be monitored before and after the exercise. So if she is motivated, if you have counseled her
Yes,
well,
ma'am, we have to motivate her. Yeah.
not to eat for two. That is the usual myth in India, that she has to eat for two, and that is why they just go on eating and eating. And in India again, that is the myth that they have to take bed rest. They somehow, the woman, they find excuses to take rest and not to work, and that also contributes to their increased weight gain.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
counsel them properly, motivate them, counsel the husband and the family members. That will also help you in achieving normoglycemia by MNT. And after 2 weeks, repeat the test. Yes.
Yeah. So at 20 weeks, her fasting was around 78 to 88, but her PPBS was always between 160 to 190. So now will you switch over to oral and this thing, or will you still continue MNT? Her HbA1c is 6.7.
No, I will combine it with metformin, because in India somehow the compliance with insulin is not that good. MNT alone will not help her because you have already given her for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So definitely combine, start metformin, which is more safer, and counsel her again properly, because metformin also has GIT side effects. Counsel her, gradually increase the dose, and MNT plus metformin at this stage of pregnancy and this blood glucose level.
Okay, very good. So now this cherry is now happily cruising her pregnancy at 32 weeks. Her PPBS is 140. Her ultrasound is normal. There is no macrosomia. Placenta is normal. So now she has a doubt, that since she has been labeled as a GDM, is the chance of cesarean section high, because there is no macrosomia, but she has been labeled as a GDM patient. So she's definitely a GDM patient. So she's asking me if the chances of cesarean section are still high.
No, the FIGO guideline says that if the weight gain is not more than 4 kg, and you said that there is no macrosomia, she's not a candidate for cesarean section unless and until there is obstetric indication. GDM per se is not an indication for elective C-section.
Excellent,
so
madam.
You can reassure her that she is not a candidate for elective C-section, I am saying. Emergency, we never know.
Yeah. So the first line of therapy you said is for medical nutrition therapy, which is the earliest intervention in preventing the intergenerational obesity. Ramani madam very rightly said. So we are going to prevent intergenerational obesity. We are going to prevent 2 generations of diabetes mellitus and metabolic syndrome. So
Lakshmi, can I interrupt 1 second? Dr. Jayashree?
Yes, ma'am.
After medical nutrition therapy, actually, in fact, in such patients, I would rather prefer to do the 7-point glucose, because fasting, PP breakfast, pre-lunch, post-lunch, and pre-dinner and post-dinner, and midnight if needed, because that will help us to get a clear-cut idea whether she has only postprandial. Like some of the patients, they have a preprandial thing will be always less than 105. But in this present Cherry's case, she has got only the postprandial rise in the sugar levels. So maybe that sort of people, even if they are metformin, basically it will prevent the it is meant only for fasting hyperglycemia, gets very well controlled with metformin. But even this small doses of insulin that have been given with each meal, that can also help to control the sugars very appropriately, that is less than 120 at any time it is being taken. So it is a question, like Dr. Lakshmi has rightly pointed out, that people in India are not for insulin, but I think it is our motivation. We need to tell them that insulin is the best drug. Metformin induced taken patients, you can always observe that there is macrosomia in the baby. But whereas the patients who are put on insulin, macrosomia is to an extent it is lowered. Again, metformin has got some effect upon the neonate. Also, there is increased evidence of hyperbilirubinemia in this,
and also IUGR.
Yes,
ma'am.
I think
madam will say,
so like Dr. Ramna Devi ma'am just mentioned, it's our job to tell the patients that insulin is indeed the best therapy for such a situation, because even if we compare a 2.8 kg fetus in a diabetic versus a 2.8 kg baby in a non-diabetic, the diabetic mother is more likely to have shoulder dystocia even with a non-macrosomic baby.
Because abdominal circumference will be higher. Next, this question is for Pooja. This patient is for Pooja Loda. Mukta madam's patient. Mukta madam, are you taking this case?
Yeah,
is
you
your
can
patient.
take it. This is my patient, but you can carry. Yeah. So this is a 42-year-old anxious Anita. She has a pregnancy after ICSI, first trial. And at 6 weeks, her DIPSI test was 210. So 6 weeks, 5 days. So her sonography shows a single live pregnancy. She has a family history of diabetes. And she had this OD cycle due to premature ovarian failure. So, Pooja, now this patient is in your field. What are you going to tell her? She is at 6 weeks and having a high blood sugar level.
So, ma'am, most of our IVF consultants are very, it's very vital that we check the blood sugars even before taking her for an IVF, which in this case we should have done, because if her BSL is 210, she is definitely a pre-gestational diabetic. And we need to do her HbA1c right now, because we need to counsel her. It's an ICSI pregnancy, so there is no doubt we are going to continue this pregnancy. But we need a glycosylated hemoglobin value to know the periconceptional hyperglycemia in the mother, so that we can tell her the risks of the fetus having birth defects. And of course, we would manage her in accordance with a physician to start her on insulin and have, like Ramni Devi madam very correctly said, the gestational age or the preconceptional time when this lady was exposed to hyperglycemia decides the fate of the pregnancy. So if it was very early, she may have a missed abortion. If it continues to be at 5 to 6 weeks, she may end up having a neural tube defect, etc. Having said that, we need to assure our patients that even with a glycosylated hemoglobin of 10%, which is actually very scary, only 20% will actually have defects and 80% will do very good. So we need to glycosylated.
Pooja, I tell you one more point. See, with the 10 percentage of hemoglobin A1C, 10% are likely to have major anomalies, and the other 10% will have only a correctable anomaly. So we are not justified in terminating that pregnancy unless we do a proper targeted imaging and document the abnormalities. Otherwise, I think we can counsel them and go ahead with this.
Yes, ma'am.
One more thing is 42-year-old ICSI pregnancy. I think preconceptionally, as you have rightly pointed out, we have to evaluate for the glycemic status, renal function test, cardiology evaluation. Everything is a must. Cardiology evaluation is also a must because she is going to be a diabetic, and diabetic cardiomyopathy and occult CCF, that has to be ruled out in these patients.
Yeah. So Jayashree ma'am, 12 weeks, something different that I would do for her is mention on the double marker that she is a donor oocyte so that we don't freak out with a 42 years advanced maternal age. I would do a very thorough early anomaly scan at 12 weeks itself, because we know that she's at a slightly higher risk of having structural defects. And a very important thing in this situation, with her age and comorbidity like diabetes, I would do a uterine artery Doppler and combine with a PAP to predict her preeclampsia, because along with her age and diabetes, she is also at a higher risk for developing preeclampsia later in pregnancy. We would start her on aspirin 150 milligrams till 24 weeks as well.
Here comes the
32 weeks, So at 32 weeks, despite her sugar and a glycosylated hemoglobin being between 6 and 6.5 and 7 sometimes, her 210 to 280. So there is some microsomia with a truncal fat. So what do you see at 32 weeks?
So when 32 weeks, we do a proper fetal well-being ultrasound, particularly in a diabetic, we need to make sure. So now this is a situation of pre-gestational diabetes. Frankly, I'm expecting more of a fetal growth restriction rather than macrosomia. Macrosomia usually occurs when there is gestational diabetes, which is after 20 weeks of hyperglycemia in the mother. But in this situation, there seems to be an end organ damage and placentopathy with a pre-gestational diabetes, and I'm expecting a fetal growth restriction rather than a macrosomia. So I'll assess the amniotic fluid, the Dopplers, and the fetal weight and the placenta. You put up a nice slide which says that
Yeah, Pooja, one important question. How would you monitor the macrosomic infant? Like, for macrosomia, she's at risk for IUFD. It's small for gestational age, then you would monitor the Leica and Doppler studies. But a macrosomic infant, a Doppler study will not, because their uterine umbilical artery is going to be good. So how would you monitor them?
So typically, in a diabetic mother whose blood sugars are not very controlled, on ultrasound we find that the head and the bone parameters are normal, but the abdominal circumference and the truncal fat is increased. So this is the first hint sometimes that we mention on the ultrasound, that kindly reassess the mother's blood sugar, because there is truncal increase in abdominal circumference as the baby. Secondly, there would be polyhydramnios with the maternal hypoglycemia. Like you rightly said, ma'am, most of these babies will have a normal Doppler. So do not get falsely reassured by a normal umbilical MCA or a ductus, because typically the reason for sudden fetal demise in a diabetic mother is not because of abnormal Doppler, but because of sudden hyperglycemia surge causing acidosis in the fetus. And that cannot be detected by Dopplers. So although you write, do a proper well-being scan, but a daily fetal kick count is extremely important for such babies.
So what are these indices we had read? Power Doppler indices, are they being done for vascularization index, flow index, and vascularization flow index? They're supposed to change in GDM?
No, not at all. For obstetricians, all we need to remember in Doppler is pulsatility index. We can just forget everything else. It's all on research. What we need to know is pulsatility index, and we've mentioned the importance of doing the uterine artery pulsatility index at 12 weeks and routine Dopplers with fetal well-being from 28 weeks onwards, like any other lady.
So is there a correlation between HbA1c, birth weight, and vascular impedance?
Ma'am, this is again research-based. Macrosomic fetuses are not likely to have clinically significant Doppler changes which could affect our decision-making. So all we need to worry about the macrosomic fetuses is sudden maternal hyperglycemia with fetal IUD rather than having any Doppler changes.
Yeah, so that's very important. So food for thought is like once fetal hyperinsulinemia occurs, like in this case the macrosomia has occurred. So does the blood sugar level really reflect the real situation? Because the fetus has probably used up the excess glucose in the blood. So artificially it might be lowering the blood sugar level. This is the food for thought. Yeah. So in a nutshell, for us to friendly festival of fun. So Pooja is giving us a fetus friendly festival of fun. Ultrasound is a good complementary tool in addition to clinical parameters in monitoring of these fetuses.
Yes, ma'am, surely. Hello.
And Doppler is important only in small for gestational. Gynecists are becoming more IT savvy with webinars. Patients are a work in progress. Use of social media. How to not compromise it. So what is social media advocacy? Please share your slides, Sachin.
Yes, ma'am.
Sachin is a very digital doc, you know. He's
I
a
would
young
like to add
doctor and
Are my slides visible?
No.
yeah, slide. You can you do your slide sharing. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not able to see your slide.
No, no, Sachin, we cannot
So
see.
cowardice asks, is it safe? Expediency asks, is it fiscally good? Vanity asks, is it popular? But conscience says, what is the right thing to do? So as far as use of social media to advise patients is concerned, Sachin will tell us which is the way forward.
Dr. Jayashree has to first stop
Can you
her
see my
screen
slides now?
sharing and then Dr. Jayashree, you have to stop sharing.
Okay.
Then only he can share.
Can you see my slides now?
No.
No, Jayashree has to. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now you share.
From my side, it's showing that I'm sharing it.
Yeah. I have to stop. I've stopped sharing.
So now can you see my slides?
No.
It has a time lag, no?
Because my
No, you
Can
just
you-
came. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait for a moment. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we can see them now.
You can see now, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yes, Sachin.
We can see you, we
Good
can
afternoon,
hear.
everyone. Hi, Pooja. Long time to see you. My topic is role of technology in gestational diabetes. If you really want to knock down your opponent, the most important thing is you know his strengths, work on your weaknesses, and hit them hard where it matters the most. So, gestational diabetes, an opponent that is becoming stronger and more unbeatable over time. Why? Because the prevalence of GDM, as Dr. Mukta ma'am and previous speakers have mentioned, that it is actually increasing over time. In 1980s, it was just 2%, which increased to almost 16-17% in 2000, as Dr. Ramani madam had mentioned. And presently, if we really look, almost 20-25% of our patients suffer from gestational diabetes. It is increasing with sedentary, stressful lifestyles, obesity, late pregnancies, and like all of you been mentioning, with bad obstetric history and ART associated bed rest. Now, if we look, 20% of uncontrolled gestational diabetes and 8% of controlled gestational diabetes lands up in preterm delivery. 4% of IUDs are due to gestational diabetes. And if we just look at all the perinatal complications, the approximate cost in India is as high as 1.5 lakhs. So our enemy is really strong, but our weaknesses are as well. Poor awareness and knowledge about gestational diabetes, even among healthcare professionals, insufficient on prevention, lack of standardized protocols in screening and management, lack of among healthcare professionals and referral system involved in providing care of GDM. And that is why when we discuss, if we were discussing with Mukta ma'am also, it is the late referral at tertiary centers that matters if we really want to save the mothers and neonates. Suboptimal care, lack of ubiquitous availability of insulin at affordable prices, myths associated with the treatment, as Dr. Lakshmi ma'am was also saying, that people are very skeptical about insulin. So the stronger the opponent, harder we need to work. But At the same time, we need to choose the right gadgets too. So technology is something that can actually, help us win this battle against gestational diabetes. So a friend in need is friend indeed. I would rather say that technology can bridge that gap that we have, we are facing in managing gestational diabetes, not just gestational diabetes, but high perinatal and maternal mortality and infant mortality rate also. How technology can help us? It can help us in prevention, in treatment, and in follow-up by promoting knowledge, attitude, and practices towards proper antenatal care, weight management, gestational diabetes, management of PCOS pre-pregnancy, and infertile patients. The data accumulated can help us in making better plans for management of these patients and better coordination between the various healthcare providers, including endocrinologists, obstetrician, sonologists or fetal medicine specialists. We have got Pooja on board. So I think technology can help us have proper coordination among all the healthcare providers with the patient. Treatment, it can help in teleconsultation and glucose sensing and insulin delivery. And follow-up can be easily done by self-blood glucose monitoring at home, along with the therapeutic audit. Where did we go wrong? Still, if the patient lands up in complications. Now, self-blood glucose monitoring, again, the technology comes in. Study the blood glucose levels that when reacts with oxygen under the presence of glucose oxidase releases gluconic acid and hydrogen peroxide. And this gluconic acid actually indirectly calculates the blood sugar levels. We have got newer glucometers as the technological advances are going on. We have got glucose meter with built-in USB, glucometer with built-in lancets, easy to carry. And HealthPaya in 2015 had introduced Glucophone, which was US FDA approved. But now we are moving from invasive tests towards non-invasive glucometers. So presently we have got Diamond Tech, which has taken a lead, which introduced D-Base in 2019, which was a shoebox-sized box. And it achieved the same accuracy as test strips. And the upcoming two products they have are D-Pockets that they expect to be released by 2021, which would be a personal device for the individual end users. And it can track blood sugar levels more frequently. So as Dr. Ramani ma'am was saying that we need, 7 tests for these uncontrolled sugar patients. So I think with 7 a day, it becomes very difficult for the patient to have a proper compliance. So I think that is where this D-Pocket can help. And by 2023 and 2024, they expect a D-Band smartwatch kind of thing, wearable device that can continuously measure the blood glucose levels without any prick or any implantation in the skin. And it can help us give us alarm whenever the sugars go either too high or the patient lands up in hypoglycemia, leading to IUFD risks also. Now, how do they work? These non-invasive glucometers work through spectroscopic photothermal detection. This technique was developed by Professor Werner Mantel and his team, which was adapted by Diamond Tech. And an infrared light beam is directed to the finger placed on sensor. Glucose in skin transforms that light to heat, and this minimal change in temperature, along with the comparison of humidity of skin, ambient atmosphere, it actually gives us statistical glucose level. This detects the glucose at the end capillary levels and interstitial spaces, and they are very accurate. Now, there are smart tattoos for continuous glucose monitoring also. You can, put those small tattoos under the skin for some time. And there are devices that can read the sugar levels. And one such project was introduced by Abbott in India for ambulatory glucose profile graph. And it was very, proud moment for us that India is the first country to introduce that. A small round water-resistant disposable sensor with self-adhesive pad is applied on the back of the upper arm. It remains on the skin for almost 14 days. It requires no patient interaction with the sensor or fingerprint calibration. Continuously measures glucose in interstitial fluid through small 5 millimeter long and 0.4 millimeter wide filament that is inserted just under the skin. It records glucose levels every 15 minutes, capturing almost 1340 glucose readings over 14 days, thus giving the treating doctor comprehensive data for the complete glucose profile of their patient. So as we were discussing that in some of these patients, the postprandial sugar levels are more rather than fasting blood sugar levels. So that dilemma can also be very well addressed through this continuous sugar monitoring. Flash glucose monitoring reader scans the sensor. Pardon, ma'am? It scans the sensor and download the glucose results that are stored in the sensor, and scanning can take place even with the clothes on. So, patient's privacy is also very well maintained and it's very convenient. Now, we all believe that prevention is always better than cure. So, I think spending 1.5 lakh rupees per patient managing the perinatal complication with uncontrolled gestational diabetes, it would cost us minimum if we could just convince our patients to or sensitize our patients towards gestational diabetes and proper antenatal care. And the ray of hope is gestational diabetes can be prevented by lifestyle intervention. It has been very well proved by many studies, and it has been proved that almost 36% incidence can be reduced by a proper diet and exercise, that is medical nutritional therapy, that is started pre-pregnancy or pre-conceptional. So the world is in your hands, and I think we need to just identify the power of friend that we have in our hand. Look at the way our friend has gone and reached the extreme corner of every member of our society. So look at 2019 data, digital, and 2020 coronavirus has actually increased changes in this data. So of 7.67 billion population, almost 5.112 billion people use mobiles. Around 4.3 billion people have got uses internet. 3.4 billion people are active on their social media, and that is social media users. And if we talk about just mobile social media, we have got almost 3.2 population, that is more than 40%. So just look at the potential that this technology, the tool or little friend in our hand can provide us. And this is pre-COVID. And I think I'm sure the COVID has increased the percolation of this mobile. And if you look at in India from 2015 to 2020, we are second populous country in the world, and not just populous country in the world, but as far as smartphone users are concerned, we are also the second in world. So almost 520 million out of 1.38 billion people, almost 5.2 billion people have got smartphone with them. So why not use this power that the smartphone has provided, going deep where even doctors could not, or our healthcare system could not go? We have got a smartphone there. And this is where the role of Happy Pregnancy Global Initiative come. 5 years back, we started a small journey. And just to share with you that in these 5 years, we could actually help 18,000 mothers across 40 countries in the world, taking the medical science related to pregnancy, parenting, and childcare in simplest possible way in English and Hindi language. As you all know that Hindi is the fourth most spoken language across the world, English being the second. So we have got almost 18,000 people. That is, every hour we could help one mother in one of the country with information related to pregnancy, parenting, and childcare. And we have tried to make it very, very simple. You can look at the slides that the patient can easily go through whatever topics she wants to go through, whether her gestational age, growth and development, how does pregnancy takes place, the normal physiological changes that happen in pregnancy, proper antenatal care regarding diet, exercise, sexual relationships that she need to take care of. In fact, Pooja would be very happy to go through our video or presentation on first trimester screening that we have mentioned in our app. Then we have got common problems in pregnancy, including urinary infections, breathlessness, itching, all the diseases in pregnancy, parturition, and other questions. The topics have been shared in a very simplified manner. This is one of the segment on disease in pregnancy, where we have talked about diabetes, thyroid problems, anemia, and this is in detail how we try to take the entire medical science in a simplified way in regional language, English and Hindi, so that even in villages, the people are able to understand what pregnancy is all about and what all things they need to take care, including the doses of medicines, but then they need to consult and discuss with their doctor, so that they don't, what happens is everybody thinks that, there's a nexus of doctors, pharmaceutical companies, pathologists that are working and forcing them to undergo all the unnecessary investigation. So once the people are aware, even in villages, no, these are the first trimester screening, it is important. 75-gram DIPSI test is important. Why do we do double marker test, or maybe what is the role of NIPT or amniocentesis? So once they're aware about all the informations, they would never ever blame their doctors for any nexus working against just to earn money. So I think we can very well make the use of social media like Facebook. Pardon?
Yeah, like after this, I just have, before conclusion, I have a jaldi 5 questions for each of the experts.
Yeah. So I
just wanted to add to Sachin that there are many calorie trackers also. Now you are on the technology part, so even the patients can just feed what they are eating and it calculates the calorie intake for them. And there are many calorie trackers. Yeah.
That is very well in our hand, ma'am. We just need to download certain apps.
Yes, yes. Just tell patients to download it. Yes.
And just for your everybody's information, Sachin has presented this Happy Pregnancy app in the House of Commons in London also. He has been awarded that. This was very proud moment for all of us that he was invited there to present this app over there.
Thank you so much for mentioning that, ma'am. I'm really grateful to you.
We are very proud of all this. We are proud. And also he's been working with us, with the government sector also, coming with his own media, his own dictaphone, his own laptop, so that he can talk to women in the rural sector also without any cost.
Great.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am. In fact, ma'am, we had started one of the projects with IIT Indore, ma'am. Unfortunately, the COVID has stopped it. Thank you so much, ma'am. We were working with one of the project with IIT Indore, like how the infrared sensors, inbuilt infrared sensors could be used as a fetal doctone, so that even a woman in village can actually share her fetal details with any of the doctor across the world. But unfortunately, the COVID had stopped that project for time being, because they could not attend their routine projects.
So it is not stopped, it is delayed, Sachin.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Madam, jaldi 5, shall we? Yeah, ma'am. Mukta, madam, please start with the questions for Ramani, madam. No, jaldi 5. Just yes, no, what?
Okay, Jayashree, you can do it. Yeah. Let's start.
Madam Ramani Devi. Can you see the slide?
Yeah.
Treatment of gestational death. We are having jaldi 5 questions for the experts. The treatment of GDM prevents macrosomia, but does it reduce the cesarean section rate in GDM?
Pooja has rightly pointed out that size and shoulder dystocia never match. Even a low birth weight baby, which is macrosomic, can have a shoulder which is broader than the head. So that is actually has an influence on the cesarean section rate, unless the baby is really very big, macrosomic, or whether there is any complication.
Hypoglycemic agents are emerging as a safe and effective option in GDM. Yes or no?
No, repeat it. You're not audible.
Oral hypoglycemic agents are emerging as a safe and effective option in GDM.
Yes, definitely. Definitely, oral hypoglycemic agents, they have a good role.
How often should you do a sugar level if the patient is on MNT and if her PPBS is below 140 consistently? How often you want to do?
See, after MMT, Dr. Lakshmi has clearly made out we need to give at least 2 weeks timing for him to come down. Then,
if the level are above 180, then you want to do it more frequently.
Yes, at least weekly twice. Maybe we. Yeah.
Achha, yes or no, pre-gestational diabetes rather than gestational has a higher risk of end organ damage, IUFD and macrosomia?
Yes, 100%. Pre-gestational diabetes are the high risk of developing end organ damage. Plus, IUF2 is very common in that situation.
Madam, you've answered the last question already. What are the risk factors for recurrence of gestational diabetes? That patient of yours had everything. What are the risk factors of recurrence of gestational diabetes?
One is obesity. Second one is if the patient is on insulin, she is at a high risk of developing recurrent gestational diabetes. And then she has to be very careful to reduce her weight, and pre-pregnancy counseling is very essential. And if she not reach the pre-pregnancy weight properly, then she again has got a risk, and family history has also got again a risk of developing pre-gestational diabetes.
Yeah, excellent, madam. Madam Lakshmi Srikhande, your Jaldi 5. Would you advocate severe calorie restriction to control glucose levels to prevent macrosomia in GDM? Would you advocate severe caloric restriction?
No.
Or
You are using the word severe. No, it should never be severe calorie restriction.
Yeah. Does MNT reduce the maternal hyperglycemia and attenuated fetal growth patterns?
MNT does help in controlling maternal hyperglycemia.
Yes.
Yeah. And how long does MNT take to achieve normoglycemia?
We give it a trial for 2 weeks only. It is not endless. After 2 weeks, we have to repeat.
So we are hammering it again and again. That is very good. What is the percentage of carbohydrate in the diet in MNT?
It should be around less than 50%, and it should be low glycemic index carbohydrate, not a very high glycemic index.
Yeah, less than. And what kind of carbohydrate? Simple or complex carbo? What kind of carbohydrate you want to give her, ma'am?
Complex.
Complex carbohydrate and not a simple. So these are all take action, call to action. So next, Sachin Koti, your Jaldi 5. Use of social media and management of GDM. What is your one thing? Is hope, hype, or harm?
It's a hope, ma'am.
Hope, yeah. Postprandial rather than preprandial sugar monitoring reduces the risk of preeclampsia associated with better and it's associated with better glycemic control. Yes or no?
Yes, ma'am. In fact, now I would add an ambulatory glucose graph would be a better one if you could offer our patients.
Okay. And third question, if a patient is on MNT, how often do you want a PPVS report?
Ma'am, as ma'am had said, 2 weeks is prefer before 28 weeks and then weekly.
Yeah, and you showed a very nice slide on flash glucose monitoring. Yes or no?
Yes, ma'am. Abbott has done wonders for Indian population.
And what about ambulatory glucose monitoring? AGP is an effective way to analyze glucose levels and interactions with their lifestyle, diet, and therapy. Whether how effective it is. 14-day AGP chart. Yes or no?
Highly effective. Highly effective.
Okay. Next, Lakshmi. Pooja. Pooja, are you ready for your Jaldi 5?
Yes, ma'am. Scared.
Yeah. So, first question: bi-weekly ultrasound and color Doppler in all GDM patients in third trimester?
Not required, ma'am.
Not required. Only for SGA infant. Yes. Okay, good.
Manage like IUDR.
Yeah. And sonographic estimation of LGA infants as predictive. Is it as predictive as clinical?
No, ma'am. In fact, there is a higher error with increasing gestational age and truncal obesity. And also, like we have re-emphasized, the fetal weight does not correspond to complications like increase in risk of cesarean birth and shoulder dystocia. There is an error of around 15 to 20% in the late third trimester.
And in extremes of birth weight. So the books say that the sonographic and the clinical are almost. What is the single best predictor in USG of macrosomia?
Abdominal circumference and truncal fat.
Okay. Fourth question, madam. More the insulin requirement, more the risk to the fetus. Truth be told, Pooja?
No, this is not correct, ma'am. This is what we have to keep telling our patients and obstetricians. Do not fear insulin. Fear a high blood glucose level, because insulin is not going to harm the fetus at all. We have seen so many women with as high as 50 to 60 units of insulin per day, managing beautifully throughout pregnancy, because insulin does not harm the fetus. It is a maternal hypoglycemia and the fear which
Madam
is
also had said the same thing. Yeah. So that's it. And the last question for you: diabetic women who do not show evidence of macrosomia, they do not need aggressive treatment. Do you agree?
No, ma'am. Macrosomia is not the only sequelae of hyperglycemia. In fact, pre-gestational diabetics will not show macrosomia. They would show smaller babies due to placentopathy and end organ damage. So there is no direct correlation between the intensive maternal blood sugar monitoring versus macrosomia at all.
Yeah. So instead of a thank you slide, in the end of the panel, I have written a take action slide or call to take action based on all the small points the experts, Dr. Ramani Devi, Dr. Lakshmi Srikhande, Dr. Pooja Loda, and Dr. Sachin Goti. Now the final comments by Dr. Mukta Jain, madam.
My comments are just the same. Please test every woman. Please make them aware, as Sachin said, and try to give MNT to all. That is only my take-home message. Thank you so much, Jayashree, and thank you all the participants for being here on a sultry afternoon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you for the opportunity, ma'am. Bye.
Yeah.
Thank
Bye.
you, ma'am. Bye, ma'am.
Yeah. Bye.
I don't think there are any questions. So I think we can just end the seminar.
Yeah. Thank you, Sudeep.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.